All right, welcome back, listeners. We're on episode 15 of Arts and Crimes. I'm your host, Kelly.
I'm Brandon.
And I'm Josh. I was going to do the shadow voice.
Okay, cool. Well, welcome back. It's been a little bit, but we're all back together again. Sort of healthy. Healthy enough. Healthy as horses.
Yeah, this might not be the best place for you to be
Yeah.
sitting.
Healthy enough to be shoulder to shoulder on the bone throne.
Where are you recording?
It's not what you think. It's a throne made of bones.
I feel like it's been far too long. What are you looking up there?
I'm just looking at different pictures of bone thrones.
So they have Skeletor's throne on there.
I should look that up.
This is really good podcast.
Yeah.
Just us Googling images. It's the activity we're doing is not very
Visual.
radio friendly, and
Yeah.
we're looking up pictures.
All right, yeah. It absolutely looks like it's made out of bones of different things. Skeletor's throne.
Why do I keep calling him Skeletor?
I don't know. Probably because you are too young to have experienced it.
Probably.
In the prime of its life.
It is made of bones. So yes, Google Skeletor throne, and that's what Brandon and I are sitting on today.
From now on, that's all you need to imagine.
Shoulder to shoulder.
Sitting there on the throne of bones.
And I'm sick, and now Brandon is also sick. Congratulations. I'm not actually that sick. Anyway, continue.
Okay.
Go on.
We're ready to start.
Okay, let's get the show on the road.
Fantastic.
Welcome, listeners. You've tuned into the Bone Throne Hour. We're going to be the new... Remember, what was that radio show that was on late at night? Loveline.
So many different
Or
radio shows,
something.
but Loveline, I think, was, right?
With
And they took
Adam
like...
Carolla and Dr. Drew. Mm-hmm. And people would call in and be like...
All right. So I think we should have a Loveline episode. So listeners, I need you to write in as many questions as possible about whatever you want us to answer.
And we'll answer them.
And if we can get enough questions to fill an entire show, we can do a Q&A show.
At the current rate, it will take one question. Given how quickly we go off on a tangent.
Yeah, how long it takes us to get to an answer.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, that'll work. Great. Okay, so circling back around to the actual beginning.
Can you circle around if you never actually started?
I mean, we got the intros in.
That's
at
true.
Least. So we just didn't get into. We didn't even make it into telling what the episode is about before
What is
we
the
got.
episode about,
Ooh,
Kelly?
this is an
So
exciting mystery.
we're going to talk about.
The Bone Throne.
Couldn't do it. We're not going to start.
As soon as you said it, I was like, "This is the joke Josh is gonna latch on to. I'm not gonna be able to edit it out."
Yeah, that was the goal. I was like,
Find something Kelly doesn't want to include and just say it so many
many
times
times.
she has to.
I have to keep it in there.
we're like Marley and Marley. What are they?
Yeah.
What are they called?
Oh,
we talked
man.
about this before.
Gosh dang
Yeah.
it.
Wilhelm and
Schmidt.
Freuden.
Yes.
What are their names?
I don't know. Ask
Schmorgan and
Michaela.
Borgen.
Get on our Instagram page. Look for Michaela's comment.
Would you Google
What are
which
those two Muppets
which
called that
Muppets sit
heckle all
on
the
the
time?
Bone Throne and heckle?
It's Statler
It's
and Waldorf.
Skeletor and Panthero.
Statler and Waldorf.
Statler
That
and
is
Waldorf. I am definitely Waldorf.
Oh,
I can say this with certainty.
man. That means I'm Statler.
Uh-huh.
Definitely some editing.
Okay, look at the picture though. Again, we are Googling and looking at pictures. Google with your own phone, Statler and Waldorf. Don't they look
All right,
like if
all right.
Mario and Luigi got old and sad?
Waldorf is the rounder-faced, white-haired, and mustached man.
Mustachioed.
Statler has a longer
Is the
face.
beak nose guy.
Wait, so
Cleft
I'm-
chin.
I'm the
You're
roundy.
the shorter guy, and I'm apparently the taller guy.
So that's
Interesting.
the opposite
So-
of real life.
Yeah.
I'm significantly taller than Brandon.
At least
I'm-
A foot or two at
Yeah.
least.
Yeah.
Brandon is a hobbit.
Imagine the movie Twins.
Yeah. That's,
I am Danny DeVito.
yeah. That's basically it.
And Josh is Arnold. Yeah. Statler Waldorf.
Okay. Sorry.
right.
Let's see if we can get through what the subject is without me shouting out bone thrown.
Okay. All right. So we are going to be talking about some art that actually did the killing itself. We're talking about Victorian era arsenic laced wallpaper.
Dun,
Bum, bum,
dun,
bum.
dun.
But also other things. Because you know what the Victorians loved?
Poisonous art?
Arsenic.
Really?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Did they know it was bad?
Well, they figure it out, and we'll get there. It's a little trial and error.
Yeah.
So, okay, the Victorian era is roughly 1829 to 1914. So that's the
That
time.
doesn't seem right.
Really?
The 1900s shouldn't be the Victorian
Wow.
era.
Technically, when I Googled it,
That's nuts.
yeah, like right before World War One.
Was it? All right, sure.
Yeah, because it
What
was,
was it? When was the start?
early 1800s. So like 1829,
So it's almost 100 years.
almost 100 years. Yeah.
Okay.
And this was like a huge time of like industrial revolution. It was kind of the start of that whole thing. And so it was just like crazy new technologies all the time, constantly. And they were figuring out like mass production techniques. They were developing all these newfangled gadgets like a stove you could keep in your house and baby bottles and like all these different kinds of clothes and all these modern comforts that were suddenly accessible to
The baby bottle is a modern comfort.
yeah
I would think so.
it was a huge so you know
What
what's
would you do
crazy
before then?
I would assume something like a camel skin thing with a little hole in it.
you know what they had
And
was
that
like
doesn't sound very comfortable.
I mean,
Bring on the modern comfort.
yeah so it was like not actually a popular thing to like feed your own child, so a lot of like wealthy people would have like nursemaids and
a
stuff.
wet nurse.
Yeah, wet nurse, stuff like that. And that was like the cool thing to do, and so they developed, because it was like not ladylike to do that,
To feed your
to
child.
feed your child, yeah. And so they developed baby bottles. This is wild. I read a whole thing about all of these different technologies, quote unquote. But they had these glass bottles that had like a big long hose in it, and the baby would just use the little hose that was in the glass bottle.
Like a straw?
Yeah, like a flimsy straw, or like has no spine.
Yeah.
What is that called? You know,
An invertebrate?
it's wiggly.
It's
straw.
floppy.
Yeah, it's floppy.
It's a floppy straw.
Yeah. But what was also crazy about this is the doctors were like,
Okay, so when you said they invented the bottle, what you really meant was they invented a cup with a terrible straw.
yeah, kind
That's
of.
not the same thing.
Even worse is the doctors were like, this is great to use. You don't even have to wash it very often. And so they wouldn't, and it would harbor such deadly bacteria that the infant mortality rate was skyrocketing.
Was this after they figured out that you need to wash your hands when you're
They're
delivering
just
babies?
learning sanitation stuff. So like they have bathrooms, they know about like maybe don't put your poop in the street and then walk in that same street kind of thing.
Sure.
You know, they're like developing sanitation, they're developing education, they're like figuring out telephones and electrical lights and all that kind of stuff. Like
Listen, whether or not we have technology that tells you that poop is bad to put in your mouth, you'd think like the sensory experience would warn you away from poop. Like your body finds it naturally repulsive, and you would be like, you know what?
ew.
Maybe I should stay away from that stuff.
Ew, David.
Yeah.
You would think, but no.
Hand washy.
Oh,
Oh, Louis Pasteur.
I was
Yeah.
thinking Louis Pasteur.
Yeah.
This is his time.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
So yes, like these were all things that were like new and exciting, and they were figuring out transportation.
It's insane how recent things that we just kind of take for granted, how like 99.9% of the human species existence didn't have any of them.
Yeah, it is crazy because you think of these things as so ancient, but like 1829 wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, and they, because of this like boom, this was also a huge time where it was sort of the rise of the middle class, and this is a time where they could have homes, they could have possessions, and the other great thing about it is because they had electricity, you could actually see all the stuff in your homes, and so they put a huge amount of value on the home and filling it with stuff. Like, you know, in that Marvel movie where freaking
Half of everybody dies.
no, not that one.
They have a big fight on a bus.
Carl Urban plays him, and he's like, "Look at my pile of stuff."
Oh yeah, in Thor
know?
Ragnarok.
Yeah, that's it. That's the Victorians. Is
They
like
wanted you
walk
to
in
look
your
at their
home and they're like,
stuff.
"Look at my pile of stuff."
And one of their things was a shake weight.
Yeah. It
You
would have
can't
been.
see, but I'm pantomiming a shake weight right now. On the bone throne. It's all thematically cohesive. Don't worry.
You know what's really funny is before this, I was poloing with Ash, and I was like, I worry this is going to be a short episode. Now I don't worry
Nope.
about that.
Yeah.
No, I mean, there
Problem
might not
solved.
be much episode for you, but this is going to be a long recording.
Yeah, that's true.
It's because we took too long. But don't worry, next week is already ready to go, and I have a big surprise for you guys.
Whoa.
So,
A bigger surprise than the bone throne.
bigger surprise than the Bone Throne. So, it'll be pretty great. Anyways, all right, rise of the middle class. Look at my stuff.
Yeah.
And it was like having stuff and having good stuff was just suddenly paramount. So much so that there was books dedicated to like running the home and how to purchase things for your home. So I looked it up and read some of the stuff, and I was like, my feminist interior does not agree with everything that's being said in this book. I don't like it. But they had like whole sections about calisthenics that are appropriate for women, and like when to wear your corset always, and all that kind of stuff.
Well, listen, you really don't want the uterus to fall out.
Yeah, you don't. They were very
Oh my
concerned
gosh.
about that.
That's the worst.
Which is
Yeah.
why women couldn't ride bikes for a long time, because
Yeah.
they thought it was gonna.
Or run a marathon. They were like, it's just all gonna come flopping out.
Yeah.
It'll be dragging on the ground.
As silly as that sounds, that's legitimately reasons they cited to not let women do those things.
Yeah.
It's great. So another reason education is important. But yeah, these books covered everything, like how much money you should be spending on decorations and furniture and all that kind of stuff, events, what kind of food you should have. So much so that they considered good taste to be directly related to having good morals. A quote from the book says, "Good taste is essentially a moral quality. What we like determines what we are, and in the sign of what we are, and to teach taste is inevitably to form character." So it was like, look, if you have bad taste, it's because you're not a morally good person.
It's almost like, you know, they say you are what you eat, but the Victorians were like, you are what your house represents.
Yeah. And they wanted to absolutely represent the best, and then go to other people's houses and judge them constantly. I'm sure. So, you know, naturally everybody wanted to make sure that their house was full of the best stuff and had the best decorations and appliances. And so humans were coming up with all these new technologies and these new advancements, but they didn't have time to like figure out if they were good. So
There is so much sociology stuff going on here that I could like go crazy, but I will not. But maybe at the end, if there's time, we can talk about it.
yeah, I'm very curious about it because sociology is not obviously it's not my thing. I do art kind of and other things maybe. So I'm really interested, but there wasn't proper testing or anything on a lot of these things. So like they had like ovens for cooking that would just sometimes explode and kill people. And that was like a risk people were willing to take because it was so great. Or like the baby bottles, like we said, they were just like
Killing babies.
killing babies, essentially.
That's the opposite of how you want a baby bottle to behave.
Yeah.
To perform.
Or corsets. So it was...
If you could think of baby bottle features like a bulleted list, killing baby would have to be the very bottom.
Very, very
You wouldn't
last.
want it on that list very high.
Yeah. If you had to list everything, that would be the last. Corsets was another technology that they were like super into in like an extreme way because they wanted to have this like fashion and modesty that was sort of reinforced in their fashion. So they had these really beautiful, impressive dresses, but you were supposed to be so corseted that it physically changed the interior organs of women that wore them. They have,
Ironically, it squeezed the uterus right out.
right out of them. It didn't.
Like a tube of toothpaste.
If anything was going to, I feel like this should have.
Uterus inside.
But I watched a documentary and they had a preserved like liver or something of a woman that wore a corset that had indents that shaped where her ribs were because it moved it up so high that it shoved it up to underneath her ribs and then indented into the organ.
That seems good.
Yeah, it was terrible. And it was so inappropriate to be out without your corsets that they had corsets for like exercising or if you were hiking, they had like ventilated corsets. They even had corsets for pregnant women because they didn't want pregnant women running around uncorseted because like, oh my gosh, the scandal.
So it was a modesty thing?
It was part of, I think it was like modesty, propriety. It was like looking, like keeping up with the Joneses kind of thing. Because you want to look like you have good morals. You want to look like you have wealth and you want to have that like desirable aspect. And women absolutely were not allowed to have any kind of like premarital anything, any kind of like relations, any of that. And having this like you could do a whole episode on just like women's attire, but having appropriate attire was just one of the ways that you could publicize essentially that you were like upstanding morals, you were doing the right things, you weren't having like inappropriate scandalous relations and stuff like that. And so it was like they were expected to be wearing them all the time.
That's really interesting because I would have thought, like, if you had asked me before we started this podcast, like, what's the purpose of a corset? I would not have guessed propriety or, morals. And I would have said that it's just a tool to reshape a woman's body to that hourglass figure that's desirable. Which almost seems like the opposite of morals because you're trying to be more alluring.
Yeah. Well, you're like trying to change what your body looks like to fit into this ideal.
Yeah.
Which I think is also a little contrary to like, if you were like morally, I don't know, I guess it depends on your morals, right? But for me, I would think honoring and respecting my body would be a moral attribute. And so physically damaging it to uphold this standard would be disrespectful to my body.
All right, guys.
It's time for the sociology stuff.
We're getting into the sociology.
Okay.
No, it's true. Like,
Yeah.
This really is.
Okay. Prepare for the lecture.
All right.
I'm ready.
Remember we were talking about ice boxes? This is going to go a lot longer than that. No, I'll try and make it short. Okay. Max Weber was a German sociologist. The Germans freaking love sociology. There's a lot of fancy German people. Anyway, he wrote a book called The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism. This is the early 1900s. So still the Victorian era, right? And what he basically said was, like, I'll just break down his line of argument. One of the key differences between Catholicism and Protestantism is that Protestants believed that you were saved by grace, that you couldn't know if you were saved, like there was election or whatever, right? Unlike Catholics, who basically believe like, oh, if the Pope says you're good, you know, like they had this very strict, like, follow the rules and you're fine. And Protestants were like, I don't know, maybe if you follow the rules, you're fine. There were a lot of different interpretations out there.
Yeah.
So they wanted to know, how can we know that we're going to heaven, right? And so they kind of worked backwards and said, well, if God blesses us, then we must be going to heaven. And how does he bless us? With money, with material goods, right? So in a strange twist of fate, people started focusing on getting money, hoarding it, displaying their funds through their fashion, all this stuff, or trying to have a perfect body that perfectly aligned with the fashion of the day, right? All those things were ways of saying, oh, look, I guess I'm blessed. That must mean I'm going to heaven, right? So
That's super interesting.
yeah. So all the stuff of like displaying your wealth, it was, according to Weber, which is, it's a pretty compelling argument.
Yeah.
It was a way of working backwards and saying, actually, it's good for me to be greedy and have all this money and not give it to the poor, because that shows that God thinks I'm better than everybody and I'm going to heaven. And so I'm going to show all this stuff to convince you, to the point that even people that couldn't afford all these outward trappings, they needed to have it. They needed to have the fashion and the knickknacks and the nice house and stuff to show their neighbors that they were going to heaven. It's this very like kind of convoluted logic, right?
Yeah. It's so, but it feels like it fits absolutely with what's going on.
Yeah.
Because they valued their stuff and presenting it so much.
And it's the same thing with the corset, right? Like having a body that doesn't fit everybody's idea of whatever the ideal body type is could be viewed as, oh, I guess God didn't love you enough to give you, the perfect
right
body
Yeah.
that he gives those of us that he likes a little bit more, I suppose.
Yeah.
So,
Oh,
it's just
man.
funny.
So true. So yeah, it's much more about like apparent morality and like honor or blessing or goodness or whatever they want to.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. Yeah. So yeah, it was all about that. And
I really hope I didn't butcher that. That was all from memory.
I mean,
from
it's
college. That was 15, 20 years ago. So
it sounds legit. Yeah.
if I butchered it, any sociology majors that are listening, comment below.
And we can talk about it next time. So yeah, they did. They focused a ton on having that kind of stuff. And one of the things that really caught popularity was having their house decorated. Again, because they had electricity now. And so they could have the lights on and show that off in their house. And one of the ways that was touted as very popular and, like, again, demonstrating your high taste and therefore your high morals was wallpaper. Which I was like, that's such an interesting thing to zero in on, is wallpaper. I remember, do you remember in our kitchen growing up, there was that like textured floral wallpaper that was just awful. It was the worst.
Yeah, it wasn't great.
And then
I do remember it.
yeah. And
Were
then
you there when we removed it?
I don't think that I was.
removing it was the worst.
I
It was such a
I don't
pain.
remember a terrible experience of removing it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I was like, I will never have wallpaper. And now that I'm older, I'm like, oh, maybe wallpaper. But I
With
don't.
arsenic in it.
With arsenic wallpaper. Wallpaper, though, has been around since the 16th century. I was doing a little bit of research on wallpaper itself. So it originated around the 16th century, but was used in very small measure by very few people. It was often like inside of cupboards or very small rooms in like merchants' homes and stuff like that. It wasn't something that was in like nobles' homes very often or anything like that. It was small measure until much later on that they started using it more commonly, like in the 1800s, like, late 17, early 1800s. And early wallpaper styles were often very floral and some had pictorial scenes that were copied from contemporary embroideries, which I thought was so precious. Like, we really like this embroidery, but it's really hard to do a lot of embroidery, so we're just going to make a wallpaper about it. It's so cute. And they were also printed in, most commonly, an achromatic color scheme, which is that it was just black and whites. Like, blacks, whites, grays, it was neutrals, no color. And part of that was because they would have to carve it on a plate and then get that paper that originally the paper was like 16 inches long and 20 inches wide. So not super big. And they would have to manually ink it and then stamp it on there. So it was just stamped paper, really. And then they would put that up, on walls. And then it wasn't until the 17th century that they started creating rolls of wallpaper and started using multiple engravings and multiple wood blocks so that they could have multiple colors. But it wasn't until the Victorian time of technological,
the Industrial Revolution.
Thank you. Industrial Revolution. That they were able to start having mass-produced products easier. And so they could start mass-producing wallpaper. And suddenly, the floodgates opened and they could have all these different designs and all these different styles and a bunch of different colors, and it was not difficult to make. So they could start filling their home with these rich, textured images, and it just fits so perfectly with their idea of just filling every room with everything just the most. So that was kind of wallpaper was pretty popular. And then in 1770, there was a Swedish chemist named Carl Wilhelm Scheele, and he invented a bright yellow paint using chlorine and oxygen, which was called Turner's Patent Yellow, because Turner stole the patent.
It was named after the thief?
The thief, yeah, because he took it and then patented it for himself. And so Scheele was like, this sucks. So he accidentally later developed, 5 years later, he found that he had discovered a new vibrant color that used sodium carbonate and arsenous oxide and copper sulfate. So it just used a huge amount of arsenic in the color. And what worked really great is it made the green color that he created just crazy vibrant. So the green colors that they were producing before were fairly muted. They were fairly dull in comparison. And people wanted to have these nature motifs. It was very popular to have sort of this green and nature brought into your home. But the greens were never matching up to the vibrancy of reality. And then he found this green and he patented it correctly so nobody could steal it. And he called it Scheele's Green after himself. And it reportedly, during this patented time and people started using it, he wrote to a friend expressing his worry at using arsenic as a compound. But his friend was like, it's fine. We use arsenic all the time. Because in Victorian times, they did. It wasn't the only color that was using arsenic. Many other colors were actually using arsenic. It just was so much more in this green color.
So did they not know that arsenic was poisonous?
What's wild to me is that they didn't. So here's what I don't understand. And maybe it's, because I have hindsight in modern technology is what I grew up with, modern medicine. They used it as a rat poison, but also as a ingredient for medicines. They would put it in ingredients for medicines. They would put it in ink dyes. They would put it in makeup products like lotions, different types of makeup that women would wear. They used it to dye fabric, in different fabric dyes. And so flowers and having, because flowers wilted and stuff, and it was such again, one of those things where you wanted to send a message or look beautiful or have this kind of eternal kind of beauty looking thing, that they would make felt flowers and put them on hats and clothes. And they used arsenic pigmented colors to dye the felts that they use for flowers.
Do you think this was a You know how dogs can't eat chocolate because it's poisonous, but people can? Where they're like, oh yeah, arsenic. It only hurts rats. It's fine for people.
That's the only thing I can think of because it doesn't make any sense.
Well, they may also, like, we're talking about they're just learning science and discovering stuff. Like, what maybe the concept of absorbing chemicals through your skin is totally foreign.
Yeah. Well, and it is in different things that they said, like, well, I mean, it's not a problem. They, like,
You're not eating it.
You're not eating it.
So
it's just in the dye. And so they would dye, like, there's this gorgeous green dress that I saw that somebody photographed. This was a while ago, but they put it up in a museum on a skeleton instead of a mannequin. Because they were like, it killed the people that wore it. Because it was so heavily dyed with Scheele's green that it, caused problems for whoever was wearing it and people that were near it. And, they used it for dyes and silk handkerchiefs. They used it in paints that they would put on kids' toys. So kids were playing with toys that had arsenic in the paint. It was like in everything. It was so wild.
Like, so it's easy kind of to, like, bash on these Victorian idiots for using arsenic. But, like, it was my lifetime that people were putting lead in paint.
Yeah. It was during this time. They also had lead in their paint.
It wasn't your lifetime.
Well,
they had leaded gasoline in your lifetime.
That's true. Well, I thought we got maybe I'm remembering this wrong, but I thought we had to scrape off paint off of our house. That mom and dad
But our
were
house
worried.
was built.
Yeah, but it was before you.
I was alive when we were scraping that paint off.
Okay, so technically you were alive when people had arsenic dresses too.
Yeah, because they're still
but
there.
only skeletons wear them now.
But also, there's still really old houses that they're still removing lead paint from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Asbestos.
Yeah.
We just have a history of finding something
Diving
that
in.
does something and be like, sweet. And
Let's
then learn later that it's bad for us.
Yeah. And it's like the other issue with it is that most forms of arsenic that they used was odorless, tasteless, and colorless on its own.
Then how did it turn
powder.
Stuff green?
Because it was a stabilizer for the pigment. I assumed.
Okay.
So it made it so that the color was vibrant and it didn't fade.
I like your iocane powder joke. That was good.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear it.
Sorry.
It's
I was
okay.
telling real facts. I'm sorry.
No, you were spitting truth.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm curious. I don't remember, when did the witch trials end?
I think it was like the very late 16 to early 1700s.
So there were a couple hundred years between then. Because I was like, maybe they thought it was ghosts or witches. They were like, this dress is haunted. Everyone that wears it dies.
Okay, you know what's wild is one of the most prolific wallpaper creators, William Morris. I'll tell you a little bit more about him in just a second, but he is quoted as, because people were complaining that they were getting sick in his factories where he produced his wallpaper with arsenic in it. He also owned a mine that one of the byproducts was arsenic powder, and they were complaining to the doctors that they were getting sick, and he was like, they're bitten by witch fever, to say that it was all made up.
Yeah.
And I just think that's really funny that he was like, using witches as a joke when it was only just a couple, like 100 years or something before his time.
So he was looking back at them, we're looking back on him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those,
like,
idiots a couple hundred years ago
Thought witches were a deal. Unlike now, give me that arsenic. Glug,
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 glug.
glug. We're so much smarter than them.
Yeah, exactly. But yes,
I have another sociological thing about this whole subject.
I want to hear.
But I
want to hear.
So, okay, this is actually about culture.
Mm-hmm.
There is, I believe, another German philosopher, George Simmel, who created this concept he called the tragedy of culture. And he said there's objective and subjective culture. Basically, what he says is, a society has the ability to produce stuff, to produce culture or knowledge or goods or whatever, right? They also have a capacity to learn how to integrate that stuff into their life, right? And he says, when our ability to produce exceeds our ability to integrate it into our life, that's called the tragedy of culture.
This Victorian era was super tragic.
Yeah, and that's like any era of scientific expansion falls into this, right? But like, especially when you compare, like you were talking about how all these basic, like, technological things were invented, right? And these dyes that just exploded and everyone started making them. And they were using them so heavily before they fully understood what they were even doing to themselves, right?
Yeah.
And like in the modern days, the same with like social media.
Yeah.
Like we know now that Instagram is bad for teenage girls' self-esteem and mental health, and boys too, right? But especially girls. And yet we went hog wild with it, and everybody has freaking Facebook and Instagram and TikTok account now, even though all of those things are demonstrably bad. And in 100 years, someone is going to look back on us and go, I cannot believe that they let that crap into their brains. Like,
That's true.
you know,
Yeah.
it is like, it's as bad for us as smoking.
Yeah. Anybody that says social media is bad is bitten by witch fever.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to tweet that right now. That was hilarious. That's me on my phone. That's how I use my phone.
The phone noises your phone makes are amazing.
But yeah, so it's so funny that like all of that stuff, when we're so consumed with like, oh yeah, we can do this and this and this and this, and we don't stop for a second to
think if we should.
Yes, Jurassic Park style.
Yeah.
So I just want to join in, and I don't have anything to add to these conversations. But
You know about flowers.
This is a really good preamble to whatever you say. It's like when Kelly starts a episode like, listen, all I got's boring stuff for the next hour. But please.
yeah, no,
I'm on the edge of my seat.
Of your bone throne.
I'm on the bone throne.
On the edge of the
I'm
bone
on the
throne.
hip bone. It's digging into my butt.
So, like, there's, I mean, what you're describing though is all the time happening, and a lot of it is getting accepted as truth or whatever. Like, what stands out to me like right now is thinking about like ice baths, like all the you know the trend to like have a trough outside that's full of ice and you go dunk yourself in it every morning. You know, like depending on who you're talking to, it's good or it's bad for you. Yeah. And like they both
have evidence.
True. Yeah. Or like there's evidence about it, right? We're constantly doing things that like we don't know if they really are good or really are bad, and somebody thought of it and somebody believed it.
I see it. I see you. It's
the Rainbow Connection.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Somebody thought of it.
So here's what makes it so much worse, though, because we do have stuff like ice baths that are probably relatively harmless, right? But that you have like people that are pro and con. But then you take something like vaccines that have been studied an insane amount, and we know that they are significantly safer than the diseases that they prevent. And yet, because we live in this world where so much is being shoved out onto the internet and into people's brains,
it's hard to sift through.
Yeah, and people then will be like, they make these false equivalencies where they're like, listen, I can't understand if a tub is safe, so how can they possibly understand that shooting tiny beings into my arm is safe, you know? And it's like, well, there's a difference, right? The tub in your backyard, some random person did, and then they were like, I feel invigorated. Okay, we're getting way off on a tangent. Did you guys hear about the guy that sweated cholesterol?
Yes! You told me about it, and it is so gross.
It's one of the grossest things I've ever heard.
I haven't heard of this thing.
Prepare yourself to have more nightmares with Panthro.
Yes.
Or whatever his name is.
Panthro. Skeletor.
Panthro.
Okay.
Pantero, I think.
Yeah, I don't remember.
I don't know.
Okay.
Pantera.
So this guy read on the internet, as many of us have, that like the carnivore diet is good. All fat, all red meat diet. And so he decided that all he would eat is steak and full sticks of butter.
Ew.
So he went into the doctor and he said, "Doctor," this sounds like a joke, but this is a real life. "Doctor, you got to look at my hands." And he had little like pustules on his hands, and he had a sheen on his hands, and like they appeared greasy. And he was like, I don't know if he said this, but I can't imagine him like, "Things are slipping out of my hands all the time." Anyway, so the doctor looked at him and they were like, "That's weird. You shouldn't sweat olive oil or whatever." So then they took samples of it and they were like, "Oh, this is cholesterol.
Straight cholesterol.
This is 100% cholesterol that your body is trying to get out of itself by pushing it out through the skin. You're not supposed to have this much cholesterol." And he was like, "Well, I don't want to change the diet. I feel so invigorated. I feel alive. My mind is sharp. And my palms are sweaty. My knees weak. Whatever.
Mom's spaghetti."
Except I can't eat spaghetti. I only eat butter and meat."
Can you imagine at their house and their kids are like making toast and they just like take it off of his hand and put it on there? He's like, "I can't believe it's not butter."
Kids are German.
I think they're Austrian.
Yes, sorry, Austrian.
Yeah, I don't do German accents.
Yes.
All of my accents end up Austrian.
Anyway, so yeah, this guy heard this on the internet and he was like, "Oh yeah, it seems solid science right there." And then he did it, and the end result is disgusting.
Yeah. It made it a little less disgusting, but it made me think of the fact that we still have to defend that the earth is round.
Yeah.
And not
yeah.
Are we sad now?
No.
I'm sad.
So William Morris.
Right.
I was circling again.
Twice bitten.
Once.
Which
shot.
bit?
Which
They got which bit?
Yeah, they got which bit. Okay, so he was
Sitting upon his bone throne,
no
dictating his memoirs to,
to the people
the
below
dying
him.
miners.
Yeah. So, like, actually, when I was reading this, I was like, I know William Morris because he is one of the leading artists for the arts and crafts movement, which was an art movement that is in direct opposition to the Industrial Revolution. So, like, we had the Industrial Revolution, and it was all, like, technology and, you know, growth. And, like, this kind of caused the environment to be smoggy, and there was buildings and industry and smokestacks, and, like, it just wasn't beautiful very much anymore.
Okay, so this is another sociology thing, the Hegelian dialectic.
Ooh,
And
I
now
like the
I'm
sound of that one.
like, I think sociologists just freaking love the Victorian era. Like, it's all they talk about. It's really the age when sociology began.
Yeah.
So
It was their golden era.
All of them are like, these are our lords. Sociology. Hegel, Weber, Simmel. Anyway, I'm not going to talk about that one because it's less applicable. But it is funny to be like, it's not that they just freaking love the Victorian era and all this stuff. All these sociological ideas spring from this one time period.
Yeah, which is so funny. But yeah, like the arts and crafts movement was it focused on like nature and more organic displays of art and that kind of stuff, and which really worked into his wallpaper designs because he had really famous wallpaper designs, and he created himself more than 50 patterns that were super well received. So yeah, and he was an artist, a designer, a poet, an activist, a novelist. And what's really funny is he is really well known for advocating to have better work conditions for his industrial workers.
The guys that were bit by witches.
But also he said that they had witch fever. So it was like a bit of a non sequitur there.
So he had a lot of good things, but also he was kind of...
But he didn't mean to.
Would you call that person
No.
what they created knowingly or unknowingly, probably led to dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands of deaths.
I would say no. I would not put murder on his
Listen,
tombstone.
you sound
I
like
think-
someone who maybe has a hobby that might be killing people.
At the most, it would be manslaughter, right?
Okay.
it
Mass
would
manslaughter.
It would be like, what's that? It's like unintentional. It's like,
Manslaughter.
Yeah, manslaughter.
yeah. Is that what I thought manslaughter was like you were slaughtering a man and that was a choice you made.
No.
Oh, you just do
That's
it
murder. That one's murder.
Man, sometimes you just are out, and without realizing it, you slaughter a man.
Just slaughter a man. I mean, it sounds so bad. Manslaughter. I mean, I know I listen to a lot of murder podcasts and crime documentaries, but I don't usually I just am like, they were guilty. We figured it out. And then I move
I don't
on.
know. Like, I have a hard time saying he was a murderer or even committing manslaughter.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he
Yeah,
was doing things that were accepted at the time. Like,
I mean, everybody was
he
using
wasn't. Yeah,
it.
he
Everybody's
wasn't, like,
doing it.
disregard those warning labels. The Surgeon General doesn't know what they're talking about. You know, like, it wasn't. Was there?
Yeah.
Why are you making that face?
All the doctors started. Okay.
The same doctors that said don't wash your
Baby
bottles
bottle. Yeah. They started. Okay.
so you can believe them when they're right, and just disregard that they're idiots when they're idiots.
When they're idiots.
I mean, that's kind of what we always do.
Yeah.
To be clear, I am with you that, like, yeah, someone that does something unknowingly that leads to harm to others, he definitely wasn't doing it intentionally, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, he was trying to enrich other people's lives.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be like, like, you know, if we meet in the hereafter and I'm like, you murderer, what are you doing in purgatory? You should definitely be downstairs.
So yeah, he was responsible for a lot of arsenic getting made and put into a lot of wallpapers, and then those wallpapers were very popular, so they got used a lot. So this Shields green, and then secondarily there was one called Paris green that also used very similar recipe. But as the influx of wallpaper kind of hit the markets and there was more and more people buying wallpaper, suddenly there was also more and more people getting incredibly ill. And at first, it wasn't necessarily obvious to the doctors because a lot of the symptoms were very similar to cholera. And so they didn't really make any kind of connection that arsenic was doing this. And so it took a little bit, but then doctors started getting reports of people that would wallpaper their whole home in this Shields green wallpaper, and then everybody in the house would get sick almost immediately. And it was so bad that there was like article after article in the newspaper about people getting sick, and then the particularly like vulnerable populace were dying from it. There was a newspaper article about a little girl that tore off some of that wallpaper and chewed it and died. And then a whole family where all four of the kids got sick and did not recover because they wallpapered their whole house in this green wallpaper. And so the doctors were like, hang on a minute. We think this is really bad. And we think it's connected to the wallpaper. And then all of the like industry people, they were like, that can't possibly be true because nobody's even consuming it. It's just in the, it's just in the wallpaper.
Big wallpaper came out swinging with their rebuttal.
Yeah. And like the problem that they were realizing, and I think you kind of touched on this earlier, is that they didn't realize that there was other means of intaking this toxin other than eating it. Mm-hmm. And so it was coming through their skin. But another thing that happened was because it was so smoggy outside and it was so terrible to breathe the air outside, they weren't opening their windows. And so they were kind of hotboxing the arsenic inside their house because they would also have the heating system at the time created a lot of moisture. And so it would get moist and then it would dry and the arsenic particles would flake off into the air. And so it would become these air particles they would breathe in. And additionally, because of that moisture, it would create this sort of arsenic mold that would grow in the house and also flake off, and people would be breathing that in. So it was coming off on their skin, it was coming off in the air, and then just like literally everywhere. And people would be advised to go like get the ocean air. Like people would be told to go to the ocean and breathe the fresh air. And they'd go and they'd recover and feel great. And then they'd come back home to this super toxic environment where arsenic is in, 90% of the stuff in their home, and suddenly be ill again. And so the doctors started saying, we think maybe arsenic is real bad.
But then all of the ocean resorts were like, I think it's fine. You know what you need? Some more ocean air.
Yeah, just come out to the ocean regularly. And so a lot of the companies sort of fought against that because they didn't want to lose this huge industry, obviously. And so many of them, like so much so that many of them said that they would eat their own wallpaper to prove that it was safe, because it was...
Did they do it?
No, they did not.
Then why did they say they were going to?
Because they were that's how confident they were that they said that they would, I guess. And also, I can't imagine that they actually would. They'd probably make some of their workers do it because they're expendable.
So these masters of industry or whatever, they probably had seaside homes that they visited regularly. They probably had larger homes with more airflow. Like they probably had the same wallpaper.
Yeah. So actually, William Morris talks about that. And that's why he says they were bitten by witch fever, because he had some of that wallpaper in his home. But he was like off in his studio all the time. He was out traveling, like doing other things. And so like probably a very similar thing where he wasn't being as affected by it because he was barely home in that room that he had the wallpaper. And so, he was very skeptical that arsenic was an issue because it was so commonplace in all these other very commonly used materials. But I will say that I think he kind of redeems himself a little bit too. So like, I want to look at the whole scope of their actions and, by their fruits you shall know them kind of thing. And I think he has a lot of things in the positive scale.
Just like that pirate.
Just like the pirate. I'm not a good judge of men. So just keep that in your hat. On that note, it wasn't very black and white. It was really hard for them to narrow it down.
It was vibrant green.
It was
that's art humor.
High class joke.
It was called Turner Green.
And Turner's like, yes, stealed another one. Stole another one.
Stealed another one. Whipped him again, Johnny, or whatever.
The shadow knows. So.
And with that, we're done with this episode. Womp.
End. Okay, so the doctor started saying, that we think this is the issue. We're seeing it in other things. People were getting violently ill, and you could see also that it was like changing skin tone. Like they would have like a greenish, grayish tint on their skin.
How vibrant was the green?
It was very sickly.
Oh.
And so it wasn't
not what they were going for.
No, it wasn't a look that people liked.
Yeah.
Anyways, I'll get to that in a second. But it became sort of this common knowledge that these things were all probably bad for you. So much so that it was started getting put in like media and in books and that kind of stuff. Have you guys read the book Yellow Wallpaper? The Yellow Wallpaper?
I have.
Love that
the
book.
Short story.
The short story, yes.
Yeah, super good.
So good.
Okay. I think I need to
Come
fess
clean.
up. I said I love that book in a sarcastic tone, but then you guys are going over the top about it. I just want the viewers to know I'm just like you guys. I've never read this book. I don't know what they're talking about.
Like, if you don't have time to sit down and read, it's a short story, so it is very quick, but it's literally like 26 minutes on YouTube. You can listen to the whole thing.
If you don't know how to read.
But you know how to look stuff up on YouTube.
You can talk to your phone. Computer, show me the yellow wallpaper.
But it is so fantastic. And so essentially it's about this woman that is kind of locked up in this room because for her health, her doctor husband says that she needs to rest in this room. And it has this bright yellow wallpaper that has this pattern that is just kind of like makes her a little bit crazy. And there's a couple commentaries about the book, the story about whether it's the wallpaper that has made her crazy or if it's a commentary about like women's health and the treatment of women during this era. Some say it's a combination of both.
So, I mean, to add some context, the author was put in an insane asylum because she liked writing. Like, they were like, a woman shouldn't enjoy making words as much as you.
Yeah.
You're insane.
You're a crazy lady.
To the asylum with you.
Yeah.
Like, that literally happened to her in real life. And then she was like, this will make a great story.
Yeah, it's so good. And it's just so excellently told. So essentially the main character is kind of just getting more and more unhinged as the book goes, and the yellow wallpaper features heavily, and it was like this Victorian style wallpaper that she describes.
It was Turner Yellow. It was because she knew.
She knew it was Turner Yellow.
And the final line is, it should be Shield Yellow. And she falls to her knees.
Soylent Green is made of people.
Anyway, I
think it's actually Soylent Green is people.
Yeah, I just made fun of a tragic work of art for a stupid joke. I apologize to all the living descendants of this woman. Whose name escapes me.
We did say it was a fantastic book, which it is.
True.
It's great. So it's a short story. You have plenty of time to fit it in your schedule, so do it.
And it does not end with her falling to her knees and saying, Turner Yellow is made of arsenic.
It doesn't. It does not end with that. So now the ending is still a surprise for you.
Yeah.
Which I feel like I'm allowed to have spoilers for a book that's been around for over 100 years, but I won't. I will leave it to the viewers to read elsewhere. I also was like, we could do a reading of the Yellow Wallpaper for an episode, and I was like, that wouldn't be nearly as
wouldn't go
fun.
well.
Yeah. So you're on your own, listeners. Anyways, so yeah, it was this, idea of wallpaper and the harm that it was causing was getting really well publicized and documented, but there was a point that it sort of finally kind of turned the corner to where change was actually going to happen. And this is through like my various reading and documentaries that I watched. This was kind of the turning point. So Queen Victoria had a room wallpapered in her mansion, castle, wherever she lived, with this Shields green wallpaper. And then she had a diplomat that came and stayed in that room overnight. And it was like it was a fresh, full room of Shields green. And he, slept in there. And then she was, quote unquote, rather put out when he didn't show up for breakfast the next morning. And so she sent people to figure out why he didn't show up for breakfast. And he had keeled over, like throwing up and in extreme pain from something, and the doctors took care of him, and they were like, it's arsenic poisoning. And she was like, what? And they were like, or whatever they say, J'accuse. And so
how do you say that in French?
J'accuse.
And so she was like, it's Shields green, it's no good. And the doctors were like, we told you. And the people were like, we knew it. So in one of these situations where it was not a law that was made or enforced, because actually making Shields green with its arsenic ingredients has never been outlawed. It's still allowed. Technically, you could make some.
You know what? I got a really good business idea.
Vintage
wallpaper.
Yeah, but people just decided to stop buying it because they didn't want it in their homes to be poisoned, wild. And so they started having this big outcry to not have wallpaper that had arsenic in it. And they refused to purchase arsenic wallpaper, and they were getting it removed. And so William Morris started producing some of the first wallpaper that he branded, arsenic free. So he made sure that it didn't have any arsenic in any of his wallpapers from then on. And he was such a huge name that companies also started following suit and creating arsenic-free wallpaper, and that's what people would buy. And it just stopped being produced because nobody would buy it.
Wouldn't it be ironic if they were like arsenic-free, made of wholesome asbestos? Safe for your baby's mouth.
Dyed blue for your safety. So after that, they stopped making arsenic wallpaper. And it was also during this time that arsenic started to be sort of a favorite ingredient that they were discovering that murderers were using. Because it was tasteless and because it was colorless and odorless.
Just like iocane powder.
Yeah.
Good one.
Yeah. So they found that there was a bunch of nurses that were using arsenic to poison people. There was a few.
How many nurses is a bunch of nurses? Were they just so tired of being nurses?
This is like your sociology thing again. There was nurses that would get their patients sick so that they could take care of them and help them recover and then get them sick again. There was this other lady that was doing it to her entire family. So she ended up killing her mom and her dad and she had 4 kids and a twin brother. And she just would do that and get them sick and take care of them. And then
they made that movie about her.
Was there a movie about
The
it?
Sixth Sense.
No.
Spoilers. That happens in The Sixth Sense.
Does it?
Yeah.
I don't remember.
When does that happen?
Is that the mom's doing that to the kid?
Yep, the mom with the daughter.
Oh, man. Well, there you have it.
And they go to the funeral. And then he's like, I see dead people.
I remember that part of the movie.
They don't know that they're dead.
And that Bruce Willis is dead.
And then she
oh my gosh, that's not 100-year-old spoiler.
Yeah. It basically is.
If you don't know that,
the end of Sixth Sense. They were finding that this was a common ingredient that people were murdering people with, and it became kind of common knowledge that arsenic was actually not good for you in any way. They stopped having it in beauty supplies and medical stuff, and the Victorians learned after only lots of people dying that it was bad. So there we go. That is Shields Green, the deadliest of colors, and all that other arsenic.
So, a call back to earlier
to the bone throw.
To this earlier in this episode where you were talking about how they had pamphlets and stuff talking about how to be a right good woman or whatnot. So, a different book that a lot of houses had was
the Bible.
Probably, but I was going to say
Bone thrown.
I was gonna say there's a flower almanac kind of thing.
Oh, yeah, because it was that was a very important language in and of itself, putting it on their hats and putting it in their clothes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you can cut this later because it doesn't segue at all into this show. But I freaking prepared.
Tell me about the flowers. I meant to have it fit in when we talked about the felt flowers earlier, but we bulldozed right on.
Yeah, so there's a secret language of flowers, Josh, and in the Victorian time, they did, a lot of houses actually did have a reference guide for what different flowers meant. And they'd use these to send messages or whatever.
So that if a neighbor came over, you would be like, did they just curse us? Did they think we're racist? And it's it's a yellow chrysanthemum.
The racist flower.
They think you're super racist.
Chrysanthemum, you say? How do you spell that?
With a C?
It would be hilarious if it was a K.
Yellow, slighted love.
Oh.
Pretty close.
Yeah. So yeah, a bouquet of different flowers would have different meanings, and Like if they tied a ribbon on it, if it was on, I think it was the right side, then the answer was yes to a question, or if it was on the left side, it was a no.
Is it their left or your left?
That's a question that I thought about, but I didn't actually research an answer to it. I assume
It's
that if
the
I was
wearers.
looking at it,
Like the flower has a front? Like the main bloom is facing you?
Yeah. Then if it's to the right of me, the viewer, I would think that that's right.
Yeah.
So we're going to say audience right and audience left.
Okay.
Anyway, so there you go.
Are there some like absolute wild meanings?
Well, I don't
Or
know.
is it
Like,
all like a
geranium means folly and stupidity.
Ooh, I like
I
that.
like that they have a flower for that.
It
You're like, you're such an idiot. I need to go find a geranium.
Yeah, though I think lavender is distrust. Right?
What?
Yeah.
Lavender is so
Or
soothing.
lily, an orange lily indicates hatred. So
Just don't give them flowers if you hate them.
That's like leaving a penny as a tip for a waiter.
yeah. So actually, like the Farmer's Almanac still has a section on flower meanings.
Does it?
Apparently,
Do you think it's evolved?
I don't know.
If I time traveled to
Now,
Victorian era,
yellow geraniums mean Riz. You're rizzed out.
Yeah.
you're a Rizzler.
It's skibbity toilet.
Yeah. No, that's bad. Skibbity toilet's bad.
Skibbity toilet. Yeah.
Yeah, that's yellow geraniums. Which
Oh
mean
yeah.
hatred.
So Riz, it wouldn't be Riz because
Yeah,
that's good.
yeah. Definitely the goldenrod is for Riz.
What is
Yeah. Encouragement and good fortune. I don't know, but so I think it's funny. Speaking about flowers, so and them having this secret meaning.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, like, these languages don't work if you don't know about the language.
That's true.
You know,
If
so,
somebody gave Josh a geranium,
Yeah.
you'd be like, oh, thanks.
yeah. Well, I mean, exactly.
But really it means
And-
skibbity toilet.
And who decides what flowers get to be the crappy things, right? Like,
Yeah.
what if I like so?
Well, and it's the same with the other stuff. Like, who is deciding that green is a good wallpaper, but red is for high-tempered men, or like people that are uncultured, hot-tempered? Like, specifically, they mentioned men.
Why would
Sure.
they even make that wallpaper?
People
to
still
sell
chose it.
to the people who are hot-tempered.
The hot-tempered man.
Yeah. Everybody needs a red room.
Yeah. So in my book, Bitten by Witch Fever, which I love, and everybody should read it. And I've never heard of it before, and I've never seen it before. I found it on the depths of the internet while I was researching. So I don't know where you would find it besides the internet, and then you'd have to own it forever, but it's fine. But it has wallpaper samples that were from the images of them, not actual ones.
I was going to say, with real arsenic?
Yeah, because otherwise they'd have arsenic in them. But this book contains like 275 different images of different wallpaper patterns that were available and used during the Victorian era that all tested positive for arsenic. So it's not all just Shields green, but there's quite a bit of red wallpapers in there. So people just didn't have good taste, I guess.
Is it poor form to get a replica of a murderous wallpaper for your house?
I don't think so. That's what I'm going to say.
What were you going to say?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about these poor schmucks who like are besmitten with someone, and they're like, pick some flowers on the side of the road or something, and they're like, these are for you. I thought they were so pretty. They remind me of you. And have it be like some wacky message about, you know,
Hate and loathing, distress,
I was
anxiety.
one such. I was one such besmitten hobo.
Romantic.
And
Riding the rails. Just looking for work.
He was a
so
boxcar kid.
when I proposed to my wife, I got her some roses, and
What color?
that's spoilers. I was gonna get to that.
Okay.
All
You're
right.
jumping ahead.
Yeah. So restart.
Okay.
Purchase the record. Start again.
So
What
anyway,
Yeah.
proposed to my wife. Got some roses, and I had this great plan. The florist helped me use some florist glue stuff, and we glued the ring inside one of the roses, and then we went on a thing, and I had her carrying them around. I thought it was great that later she would like look back on it and think like this whole time she had been holding the ring.
Oh.
You know?
Such a romantic.
Anyway, I told my cousin about this plan or whatever, and I got her yellow roses because she had told me that there were like she's not super into flowers anyway, but yellow roses were kind of her favorite or whatever. If she's going to get a rose, yellow, right? And I was telling my cousin about this, and my cousin was like, yellow is for friendship.
You friend zoned yourself.
Your proposal flowers were friend zoning you.
Yeah. And I was like, who says? They're the flowers she likes.
Did you look it up in the thing? Is Victorian era yellow roses a bad thing?
Oh, no, I didn't.
Yeah, you should double check. Maybe.
All right.
Maybe your cousin was wrong.
Yeah.
What if the ring fell out?
It's worse.
What is it?
Jealousy, decrease of love, infidelity.
That's real bad.
Yeah. Like, I love you. Will you marry me? With these infidelity roses?
Decrease of love. But were you worried that the ring would fall out? I also would have worried about that.
I don't know. I guess I had just blind faith.
In the florist?
Yeah.
Who didn't tell you yellow
why didn't
roses?
the florist tell you?
Yeah.
Maybe she was just the customer knows what the customer wants.
The customer is always right kind of thing. But the full phrase, and I love doing this.
I've heard this.
Yeah,
recently.
the customer is always right in matters of taste.
Yes.
So a customer doesn't get to go in and be a jerk about stuff. They can buy whatever they want because it's their money, but they still have to treat service
If they
people
want
like humans.
stupid yellow roses that
Yeah,
indicate
to propose to
infidelity,
their.
that's their choice.
Yeah, exactly. So, yes, that's the full phrase.
I like the idea that you just like hot glued them with just a gallon of hot glue. And so you're like, haha, she'll never notice. She's like, why is this rose just
glue?
encased in amber? Just came that way.
Yeah.
All roses look
You
like
have
that.
Yeah.
This is what fresh roses look like. The ones you get from the store have all the hot glue taken off.
These are wild roses.
From the hot glue mines where they grow roses.
All right, that's it.
All right. Well, it's time to close up shop.
Yeah. So yeah, that was Art That Kills, and some of these wallpaper patterns are fantastic. So I will try and put a bunch of them up on the old Instagram, because we all know social media is good for you. It's only good. The doctors say. So yeah, there we go. Luckily now, don't worry. You can buy all the wallpaper you want, and it won't have arsenic.
But it could still be poisonous and we don't know it.
Well, I mean, yeah, because in 100 years, we'll look back and be like, those idiots. There we go. Thanks for coming on this Victorian era journey with me.
It were great.
Yeah.
If it turns out later that podcasts are destroying your brain, I apologize.
Yeah, we don't mean
We
it.
didn't mean to.
Yeah.
It can't possibly be destroying your brain any more than having a conversation with your family.
Well,
That's what they said about arsenic wallpapers.
yeah, there you go. All right. Well, thanks again for listening. And as always, go do some art. Don't do any crimes.
It were great.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Dun, 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 dun. Boom. Teenagers need a safe place to ask dumb questions.
Like
Yeah.
a radio show.
Yeah, that's
Or a
broadcast
podcast.
to all their friends. I wonder if all the teenagers were putting on voices.
So they wouldn't be recognized by their friends.
Hello, I've got a question for you.
Yeah. It's absolutely the voice of a
They
teenager would
would
make. And I'm Josh. You know, something like that, you know? Like doing his shadow.
It's like listening to a mirror.